Did critics accidentally throw away some of the wildest sci-fi thrillers of the 90s? Back then, reviewers called them messy, stupid, ugly, overacted, too violent, or just plain garbage. But years later, these same films became late-night obsessions, cult classics, and guilty pleasures people still defend with a straight face. Today, we are reopening the case on 15 movies critics buried. And number one may be the biggest mistake they ever made. Wing Commander, 1999. Sometimes a movie is so proudly stuck between a video game cutscene and a Saturday morning space serial that critics never stood a chance. Released in 1999, Wing Commander arrived with one impossible burden. It had to turn a beloved video game franchise into a serious, theatrical sci-fi adventure. Instead, critics saw stiff dialogue, thin characters, and space battles that felt smaller than the imagination behind the games. But here is the strange thing. For a certain kind of viewer, that is exactly why it still works. There is something charming about its straight-faced commitment to old-school space heroism. The film has pilots, alien enemies, military tension, ancient prophecies, and young heroes trying to look serious, while the entire universe seems built from pure late 90s genre obsession. It is not sleek like The Matrix. It is not terrifying like Event Horizon. It is more like a forgotten VHS tape from a world where every video game deserved its own space opera. Critics called it clunky, fans called it camp, and decades later, it survives because it never pretends to be cooler than it is. Wing Commander may not be great cinema, but as a guilty pleasure relic of 90s sci-fi ambition, it absolutely earns its seat in the cockpit. Virus, 1999. A haunted ship is creepy enough, but a haunted ship controlled by alien electricity and human body parts is pure late 90s madness. Released in 1999, Virus was destroyed by critics who saw it as noisy, ugly, mechanical, and painfully ridiculous. And honestly, they were not completely wrong. This is a movie where a mysterious alien signal infects a Russian research vessel, takes control of the machines, and starts turning human bodies into grotesque cyborg weapons. Subtle? Not even close. But that is also the reason it has refused to disappear. Virus belongs to that special category of sci-fi thriller where the idea is so wild that you keep watching just to see how far it will go. The film throws together stormy seas, industrial horror, killer technology, and body horror imagery like someone dumped Alien, The Terminator, and a haunted house movie into the same engine room. Jamie Lee Curtis later spoke negatively about the film, which only added to its reputation as a troubled disaster. But for fans of grimy techno-horror, Virus has a strange, junkyard appeal. It is messy, it is loud, it is sometimes absurd, but it has metal claws, screaming machines, and a villain made of pure electronic rage. That kind of trash has personality. Virtuosity, 1995. Before people feared AI chatbots, this movie asked a much crazier question. What if artificial intelligence became a serial killer with celebrity confidence? Released in 1995, Virtuosity was exactly the kind of high-concept cyber thriller critics love to mock. The plot sounds like it was cooked up in a neon-lit arcade, a virtual reality criminal program built from the personalities of history's worst killers, escapes into the real world inside a synthetic body. Suddenly, Denzel Washington is chasing Russell Crowe, who plays the villain like a digital psychopath who just discovered fame, fashion, and chaos all at once. Critics complain that the movie was overblown, silly, and too in love with its own techno gimmick. But that is also what makes it such a perfect 90s artifact. This was the decade when virtual reality felt dangerous, the internet felt mysterious, and every computer screen looked like it might open a doorway to hell. Virtuosity takes that anxiety and turns it into a flashy action thriller with no interest in restraint. Russell Crowe's performance is wild, theatrical, and strangely magnetic, while Denzel gives the movie more weight than it probably deserves. Is it polished? No. Is it subtle? Absolutely not. But as a cyberpunk guilty pleasure about technology becoming evil with a smile, Virtuosity is ridiculously entertaining. Godzilla, 1998. Few monster movies have ever been hated so loudly by fans and still remembered so fondly by people who grew up with them. Released in 1998, Godzilla was supposed to bring Japan's legendary kaiju icon roaring into the Hollywood blockbuster machine. Instead, critics and longtime fans attacked it for turning Godzilla into a giant, fast-moving lizard that ran through New York instead of standing like an unstoppable myth. The movie was accused of missing the soul of the original creature, leaning too hard on disaster spectacles, spectacle and stuffing the story with thin characters. But here is where nostalgia complicates everything. For many 90s kids, this was not a betrayal. It was their first giant monster event. The rain-soaked New York streets, the taxi chase, the massive footprints, the helicopters diving between skyscrapers, all of it had the oversized energy of a blockbuster that knew exactly how to sell chaos. The soundtrack, the marketing, the creature design, even the famous teaser campaign all became part of its strange legacy. As a Godzilla adaptation, it remains controversial. As a late 90s disaster thriller, it is pure guilty pleasure. Critics saw a failure. Fans who were young enough saw a monster movie that felt huge, loud, and impossible to ignore. Sometimes the wrong Godzilla still leaves a giant footprint. The Lawnmower Man, 1992. Before virtual reality became a tech demo, this movie turned it into a full-blown nightmare about intelligence, power, and losing control. Released in 1992, The Lawnmower Man was attacked by many critics for being over-the-top, silly, and filled with early CGI that now looks more like a haunted screensaver than the future. But that is exactly why it has become such a fascinating 90s artifact. The story follows a simple gardener who is pulled into a scientific experiment using drugs and virtual reality to expand his mind. At first, it looks like a miracle. Then the miracle starts turning into something dangerous. The film taps into a very specific early 90s fear that computers were not just tools, but doorways into a reality humans were not ready to control. Its digital worlds are strange, colorful, and ridiculous, but they also capture the moment when VR felt mystical, scary, and unstoppable. Critics laughed at the effects and melodrama, but fans remember the ambition. The Lawnmower Man may be messy, but it had the nerve to imagine technology changing the human brain before the mainstream even understood the internet. That makes it flawed, weird, and absolutely perfect for this list. Hardware, 1990. This is not shiny cyberpunk. This is cyberpunk dragged through rust, blood, sweat, and desert dust. Released in 1990, Hardware is the kind of low-budget sci-fi horror that feels dangerous before anything even happens. The story is simple but nasty. A scavenger brings home pieces of a destroyed military robot, only for the machine to rebuild itself inside an apartment and turn the place into a metal death trap. Critics were divided, and many dismissed it as too grimy, too derivative, or too harsh to enjoy. But that dirty texture is exactly why cult fans embraced it. Hardware does not feel like a clean studio future. It feels like the future after everything has already gone wrong. The world is polluted, overheated, overcrowded, and spiritually exhausted. Every wall looks stained. Every machine looks infected. And when the robot comes alive, it is not just a killer device. It feels like the physical form of a broken society. The film mixes cyberpunk attitude, slasher tension, industrial music energy, and apocalyptic paranoia into one sweaty nightmare. It may not have the budget of the bigger 90s sci-fi thrillers, but it has something many of them lack. Atmosphere that crawls under your skin. Hardware is ugly in the best possible way. The Arrival, 1996. Some alien invasion movies arrive with exploding landmarks. This one sneaks in through static, signals, and the terrifying idea that Earth may already be compromised. Released in 1996, The Arrival gave Charlie Sheen one of his strangest genre roles. A radio astronomer who detects an extraterrestrial transmission and then realizes the truth is being buried by people who do not want humanity asking questions. Critics were not exactly lining up to crown it a classic. Some found it cheap-looking, uneven, and too pulpy for its own big ideas. But that is also why the movie has aged better than expected. It has the paranoid charm of a late-night cable thriller, where every government office, desert observatory, and mysterious stranger feels like part of a hidden machine. The best hook is not just that aliens exist. It is that they may be quietly changing the planet while humans argue, ignore warnings, and look the other way. That climate angle gives the film a sharper edge today than many viewers noticed back then. The effects are sometimes rough, and the pacing can feel very 90s, but the conspiracy energy is strong. The Arrival works because it understands one thing. The scariest invasion is not the one that blows up cities. It is the one already happening while nobody believes the person who found it. Escape from LA, 1996. Critics wanted another cool dystopian classic. John Carpenter gave them a ridiculous political nightmare wearing sunglasses and laughing at America. Released in 1996, Escape from LA was hammered for feeling like a weaker, louder remake of Escape from New York. The plot was familiar. Snake Plissken gets forced into another prison zone mission, this time inside a ruined Los Angeles cut off from the rest of the country. But the mistake many critics made was treating the movie like it wanted to be sleek. It does not. It is deliberately cartoonish, bitter, exaggerated, and full of acid. The surfing scene is absurd. The basketball scene is absurd. The effects can look shaky. But beneath all that madness is Carpenter taking aim at celebrity culture, political extremism, media obsession, moral hypocrisy, and America's love of turning punishment into entertainment. Kurt Russell plays Snake like a man who has already seen the punchline and hates everyone for not getting it. That is why the movie has become more interesting with time. In the 90s, it looked like a messy sequel. Now, it feels like a satire that was too blunt, too strange, and too angry for its own release date. Escape from LA may be uneven, but it has attitude, and attitude ages better than polish. Stargate, 1994. Before it became a franchise, Stargate was just one big, weird question. What if ancient history was actually alien technology waiting to be switched back on? Released in 1994, the film was not treated gently by many critics. They complained about flat characters, clunky dialogue, and a story that sometimes felt more interested in spectacle than emotional depth. But audiences saw something else hiding inside it. A massive doorway. The movie begins with an ancient artifact found in Egypt, then turns into a military expedition across the universe, where mythology, science fiction, and desert adventure collide. That combination gave Stargate a flavor most 90s blockbusters did not have. It was not just laser guns and spaceships. It was pyramids, false gods, alien rulers, enslaved civilizations, and the thrilling idea that human history had been manipulated from the shadows. Kurt Russell brings the soldiers' grief and toughness, while James Spader gives the film its nerdy curiosity. Together, they turn a high-concept premise into something oddly watchable, even when the script gets thin. Critics may have seen a flawed sci-fi adventure, but fans saw a universe big enough to keep expanding, and that is exactly what happened. The movie's greatest achievement was not perfection. It was possibility. Stargate opened a portal, and viewers happily walked through. Johnny Mnemonic, 1995. This movie looked at the future and somehow predicted both the internet age and the migraine that came with it. Released in 1995, Johnny Mnemonic was dragged by critics for awkward acting, strange dialogue, chaotic plotting, and a vision of cyberspace that already seemed ridiculous to some people. But decades later, that same ridiculousness is exactly what makes it fascinating. Keanu Reeves plays a data courier who stores secret information inside his own brain, only to discover that the information is so valuable it could get him killed. That premise alone is pure cyberpunk gold. Human memory turned into storage space, corporations controlling disease, hackers fighting through digital hallucinations, and a world so overloaded with technology that people are literally getting sick from it. The film is messy, yes, but it has personality in every corner. Ice-T leads a resistance group. Dolph Lundgren appears as a bizarre street preacher assassin. The internet looks like a dangerous neon dream, and Keanu delivers lines with the intensity of a man trapped between an action movie and a software crash. Critics saw nonsense. Fans now see prophecy wrapped in camp. Johnny Mnemonic may be clunky, but it captured something real. The fear that the future would not make humans smarter. It would just upload the chaos directly into our heads. Existen Sie, 1999. David Cronenberg did not make virtual reality look cool. He made it look wet, infected, addictive, and almost impossible to escape. Released in 1999, Existen Sie arrived in the same year audiences were being dazzled by smoother, flashier visions of simulated reality. Compared to those films, Cronenberg's version felt grotesque and deeply uncomfortable. Critics and mainstream viewers did not fully embrace it at the time, partly because it refused to give them clean sci-fi fantasy. This was not about shiny headsets and stylish black coats. This was about organic game pods, bioports drilled into human bodies, and players who slowly lose track of where the game ends and reality begins. Jennifer Jason Leigh plays a game designer whose latest creation may be revolutionary, dangerous, dangerous, or both. Jude Law becomes her nervous guide through a world where every choice feels scripted, every identity feels unstable, and every layer of reality might be fake. The genius of Existence Z is that it understands technology as something intimate and invasive. It does not just entertain people, it enters them. That idea feels even sharper now, in a world addicted to digital lives, online personas, and artificial experiences. Critics may have found it too strange, too ugly, or too slippery, but that is the point. Existence Z is not comfortable sci-fi. It is a warning disguised as a fever dream. Strange Days, 1995. Some movies predict the future by showing gadgets. Strange Days predicted the sickness underneath them. Released in 1995, Catherine Bigelow's cyberpunk thriller was a major box office disappointment, and many viewers at the time did not know what to do with it. It was too violent for some, too bleak for others, and too tangled in social unrest, police corruption, voyeurism, and digital addiction to become an easy mainstream hit. But that is exactly why the movie has become more powerful with time. The film imagines a device called Squid, a black market technology that lets people record and replay another person's memories, emotions, and physical sensations. On paper, that sounds like a sci-fi gimmick. In practice, it becomes something much darker, a way for people to escape reality, exploit trauma, sell fantasy, and turn human experience into a product. Ralph Fiennes plays Lenny Nero, a hustler drowning in nostalgia and obsession, while Angela Bassett gives the film its real moral force as Mace, the one person who can see how rotten the whole system has become. Critics and audiences may have missed its urgency in the 90s, but now it feels painfully ahead of its time. Strange Days is not just about future technology. It is about people choosing artificial experience over truth. That is why this so-called failure now feels less like garbage and more like a warning we ignored. Dark City, 1998. Before The Matrix made reality itself look suspicious, Dark City had already trapped humanity inside a nightmare with no sunrise. Released in 1998, Alex Proyas's sci-fi noir was not exactly treated like trash by every critic, but it was overshadowed, misunderstood, and denied the massive cultural moment it deserved. Many audiences simply did not know how to categorize it. Was it a murder mystery, a dystopian thriller, a dreamlike horror film, a comic book nightmare? The answer was yes, and that confusion became part of its strange power. The story follows John Murdoch, a man who wakes up accused of murder in a city where night never ends, memories cannot be trusted, and mysterious pale figures secretly reshape buildings, identities, and entire lives while everyone sleeps. The concept is brilliant because it turns paranoia into architecture. Streets move, lives are rewritten, lovers become strangers, and reality itself feels like a prison designed by beings who see humans as experiments. Critics who wanted cleaner storytelling may have found it strange, but cult audiences recognized something extraordinary. A film with the soul of classic noir and the imagination of high-concept science fiction. Its visual style, shadowy mood, and philosophical anxiety helped it age beautifully. Dark City did not need to be louder than the films that came after it. It just needed time. Now it stands as one of the great overlooked sci-fi thrillers of the decade. Starship Troopers, 1997. The funniest thing about Starship Troopers is that the movie was mocking propaganda so hard, some people thought it was propaganda. Released in 1997, Paul Verhoeven's violent sci-fi war satire confused and angered many critics who read it as a shallow, militaristic, bug-blasting adventure. On the surface, it looked like exactly that. Beautiful young soldiers, giant alien insects, patriotic speeches, recruitment videos, and massive battles filled with explosions and body parts. But underneath the glossy surface, the movie was doing something much sharper. It was copying the language of fascist propaganda to expose how seductive, stupid, and dangerous it can be. The fake news broadcasts, the cheerful calls to enlist, the plastic perfect heroes, and the constant us versus them messaging are not accidental. They are the joke and the warning. Back in the 90s, many reviewers seemed to miss the target because the satire was delivered with a straight face and a lot of gore. But that is why the film has aged so well. It trusts the audience to notice the poison inside the packaging. The bugs are scary, but the human society may be even more disturbing. Today, Starship Troopers is not remembered as a dumb action movie. It is remembered as one of the boldest sci-fi satires Hollywood ever smuggled into multiplexes. Critics called it brainless. The movie was laughing at brainless systems the whole time. Event Horizon, 1997. Sometimes critics call a movie too chaotic because they are not ready for how deep the nightmare goes. Released in 1997, Event Horizon was savaged by many reviewers who saw it as too gory, too loud, too confused, and too desperate to shock. At the box office, it failed to become the major sci-fi horror event it wanted to be. But years later, something changed. Viewers found it on cable, DVD, late-night television, and word of mouth. And suddenly, this rejected space nightmare became one of the most beloved cult horror films of the decade. The setup is brutally simple. A rescue crew investigates a vanished spaceship that has suddenly returned after traveling somewhere it was never meant to go. But the genius of Event Horizon is that it does not explain the horror too cleanly. It suggests something worse. The ship did not just cross space. It may have crossed into a dimension of pure suffering, then brought that evil back with it. Sam Neill's descent, Lawrence Fishburne's grim authority, the blood-soaked visions, and the cathedral-like production design all create a feeling of cosmic doom. This is not sleek science fiction. It is a haunted house floating in deep space where technology opens the wrong door and faith cannot close it. Critics saw excess, fans saw atmosphere, terror, and imagination. Event Horizon earned #1 because it proved the ultimate cult movie truth. Sometimes the film everyone rejects is the one that refuses to die. So maybe the critics were right about the flaws, but completely wrong about the fun. These 90s sci-fi thrillers were messy, loud, strange, and sometimes ridiculous. But that is exactly why we remember them. Which garbage sci-fi movie do you still defend with no shame? Drop it in the comments and subscribe for more cult classics Hollywood underestimated.